Well, today is a beautiful spring day in Atlanta after a very long, rainy April day yesterday. And this past Thursday was Earth Day for all of us. So again this year, we join with millions of people of all faiths and all nations around the globe in giving thanks for the beauty and the abundance of the earth, and to reflect on our responsibility to care for all creation. And I think our gospel passage today really fits this theme. For in this story that was read, Jesus compares himself to a shepherd, and a good one. For he says, "I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Though the hired hand runs away because the hired hand does not care for the sheep, but I am the good shepherd." I think this is a great image for Earth Day, for considering our relationship to God and to our environment. Now, I suspect that the closest most of us have been to sheep or shepherds is probably wearing a wool sweater. You and your neighbors may have taken up raising chickens this year, but I doubt many have taken up raising sheep. And if our image of a shepherd comes from those children's Bibles or storybook pictures of Jesus holding a cute little lamb, well, we may be missing some of the meaning of this metaphor. Because raising sheep is hard work, and it's dirty work, and it's messy, and it's demanding. It's spending long nights outside watching for predators and watching out for thunderstorms, for tornadic winds, for landslides or floods. So the shepherd has to be tough, and a shepherd is wise. I also like to think that a shepherd is passionate about the sheep and that work of taking care of them. And when I think of that, it always reminds me of border collies and the joy they seem to have as they chase the sheep around, corralling them and guiding them and keeping them together and seeming to really love them in this work that they were born to do. There's an element of excitement watching the border collies work with the shepherds to keep the sheep together. Yes, a good shepherd would need to be ready to run off the wolves who are looking at those sheep as food. But a competent and a caring shepherd would also need to pay attention to the environment in which the sheep are grazing. For a good shepherd knows that the health of the sheep is dependent on a healthy environment. There must be fresh grass to eat, clean water to drink, clean air to breathe. So Jesus is our good shepherd, our good and wise and passionate shepherd, guiding us to stay together, to care for one another, to care for the land and the water and the air that sustains us all and nourishes all of life on this one amazing planet. And our Old Testament passage today that we read this morning, it also reminds us of God's care for the earth. For Isaiah declares, when the Messiah comes, the wilderness and the dry land will be glad, and the desert shall rejoice and blossom. There's a vision here of a healthy, thriving environment, a vision the people needed so much then, and a vision that we need to claim as our own today. For around 700 BC, life had become like a desert to the people of Israel. Their cities had been destroyed in war. Many of their people had been killed. Their farms were burned to the ground. And they lived in captivity for nearly 50 years. And life felt hopeless, feeling of a dry, endless desert. And it was in this setting that Isaiah wrote these words, when the Messiah comes, your deserts will bloom. And the prophet went on to say, I will make your wilderness into a pool of water, and your dry land I will make into springs of water. And I will put trees in your desert, the cedar, the acacia, the myrtle, for I will make your desert like a garden. When the Messiah comes, your deserts will begin to bloom again. This passage of Isaiah speaks of God's desire for the renewal of creation. The wilderness will rejoice and the desert will bloom. The road on which God's people travel will be holy, healthy, flourishing, a beautiful path. This vision of renewal, it keeps the renewal of creation and human salvation together as one common goal of God's promises. Our scriptures do not describe an escape from creation. Trying to send a spaceship to Mars is not the answer that God had in mind. For God's purpose and plan are descriptions of life flourishing here in this created order. And yet, it's a picture that seems to be fading farther and farther from reality. Rather than working together towards this vision of God, we have become the cause of its destruction. By now, any previous arguments about the reality of climate change are over. Our government tried to take the language of climate change off their website, and that did not stop it from continuing to wreak havoc with our weather and our water and our air. For the earth is warming at an increasing rate, and scientists anticipate the pollution of our planet will only get worse if other countries are striving to achieve the standard of living that we in the U.S. already have, unless we can work together to bring about change. We can no longer deny the consequences of our activities. For the melting ice caps and the glaciers shrinking and the rising coastal waters, all these abnormal weather patterns with intensifying storms and droughts are our doing. And the plastic particles in the ocean that are now making way into our water and food supplies, increasing our cancer levels, are increasing. As followers of the risen Christ, how do we respond to this crisis of our fragile earth that is our home? What our scriptures are trying to teach us is that God seeks to redeem not just humans, but creation itself. The well-being of creation and the well-being of humans are bound inextricably together. We cannot live without a healthy environment. Our environment could live much better without us. But we are called to care for one another, and now we're beginning to understand that caring for one another requires caring for the creation that nourishes and sustains the people and the lives of those we have been given to love. So we need to join with people of all nations and people of all faiths to work for God's vision of redeeming creation. And we are each individually called to take care of this earth in whatever ways that we are able. We need to continue to learn about the problems, the needs of our environment. It's a never-ending process. And then we can carefully choose which specific actions can we take. How much can we recycle? How much do we need to drive? How much electricity do we need to use? We can plant trees here and support environmental efforts around the world. But I know when I skip the straws and I carry my shopping bags and I refill my thermos with water, I know that my small efforts are not going to solve the problem alone. Maybe it's more actually a way of reminding myself that the real goal is to change the system, to create better and safer options for everyone. And COVID-19 has been a challenging experience that has given us a dramatic new awareness of the many interconnected issues that we face: the racism, the health inequality, the economic disparity. It has shown us how fragile our world society really is. So, yes, we need to do what we can as individuals, but now our individual efforts won't be enough. We've grown up in a culture that It shows up our individual needs, our competitive self-interest, our excessive individualism, a culture that rejects and demeans the need for compassion and solidarity. When we have been steeped in a culture telling us to think of ourselves as consumers more than citizens, as self-reliant more than interdependent, is it any wonder that we deal with a systemic issue by trying to rely just on our individual efforts? But it's only by working together and joining our voices that we will have the power to change the trajectory of this climate crisis. And we believe that the impulse for humans to come together and be strong together is there. The collective imagination is beginning to come together. We are now back in the Paris Climate Agreement. There's a renewed commitment to clean energy. We have hope of joining together. And faith communities can play an important role in influencing our elected officials to get the laws that we need to change our energy future, to using renewable energy, to moving away from fossil fuels. We can join in advocating for policies here and around the world that will lessen the damage, that will begin to seek restoration where it is needed. And yes, we can send emails and make phone calls and attend public policy meetings, show the world that people of faith are committed to creating strong and resilient clean energy communities locally and globally. Together we need to pray for the people who are now currently most affected by environmental degradation in all its forms. And we need to act together to find ways to minister to those who are most impacted by air pollution, by unsafe water, by weather disasters. So you can become an advocate in your neighborhood, in your community, beyond. And then with the help of local partners, we can learn to engage in environmental advocacy. We together here are trying to invest our church money responsibly, investing with financial institutions that prioritize sustainable, ecologically responsible investment. And the Reverend Sally Bingham reminds us that all of this has to start from within, from the heart. We don't harm what we love. If our hearts can be transformed to love what God loves, to love what God has given us, we will become caretakers of the earth. If we love as God loves, we will become environmentalists. We will want to protect our air, our land, our water. We will become informed as to how we can do that as it changes direction. So let's bring our faith and the natural world together. Let's become stewards of creation, good neighbors, people who care about the legacy that we leave for the next generations. And let's proudly become environmentalists. What we can do, we can believe the scientists. We can start to live lives that demonstrate love for one another and love for God and love for creation. If we can just learn to love this natural world, we will protect it. And if we truly love one another, we will want future generations to share this beauty that we have had during our time together. Our good shepherd, our good and wise and passionate shepherd, willing to lay down his life for the flock, is calling us to lay down just some of our comfort and some of our privilege to care for one another and to care for God's good creation.